Okay. Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Kung anong oras ka man nakikinig, I would just like to welcome you to the second episode of the video lessons of our Criminal Law Jurisprudence 2, Human Rights Education. So, huwag na tayong magpatumpik-tumpik. Pag-usapan na natin kung ano nga ba ang Module 1. Ang Module 1 is actually about the fundamental concepts and principles of human rights. So, we're going to talk about the different basic concepts and, of course, yung mga major categories ng human rights, pag-uusapan din natin yan on this module. So, bago tayo mag-umpisa, aralin muna natin yung mga terminologies na meron tayo na related dito sa topic natin. Una is yung term na human. Anong ibig sabihin ng salitang human? Okay. So, meron tayong basic or technical definitions ng salitang human. Human, homo sapiens, ako, ikaw, we are human. So, here we have number 1, being or relating to or belonging to a person or to people as opposed to animals. Anything that is relating to or belonging to a person, okay, kagaya ng human body, human brain, okay. So that is how the dictionary.cambridge.org defined the term human. On the other hand, by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, ang definition is of relating to or affecting people. Okay? Typical of people. Yan. So, that is one definition of human. So, may nakalagay din dyan having good or bad qualities that people usually have. So, ang term human, ginagamit din natin yan kapag we are describing the action of a certain person or the quality of action of the certain person as to bad or good. So, for example, mabuti yung nagawa niya, nakatulong siya sa iba. So, di ba, may mga terms tayo na naririnig na, oh, that is so human of you. Di ba, napa-English tayo doon. So, yun, those two are some of the technical definitions of the term human. Next one, we define the term rights. Okay, ano bang ibig sabihin ng rights and how is it so important in this subject or in this time? Okay? So, pag sinabi natin rights are entitlements, okay, to perform certain actions or to not to perform certain actions. Kumbaga, these are entitlements, karapatan na i-perform natin yung mga certain actions din or hindi natin i-perform. Ano kayang ibig sabihin nun, no? So, parang ganito. We have the right to life. We have the right to work. We have the right to education. So, karapatan natin, we are entitled to have those kind of things. Okay? Pero, we also have those kind of rights na not performing. Kumbaga, hindi natin gagawin, pero karapatan pa din natin na hindi gawin yon. For example, you are a person of interest in a custodial investigation. You don't want to give your statement, okay, without your lawyer. So you have executed your right to remain silent as of that time. Okay, so you are not performing a certain action. Okay, so rights are entitlements to perform certain actions, to be in certain states, or entitlements that others perform. Okay, certain actions or be in certain states. So ang rights, it's for me, it's for you, it's for everyone. Hindi yan namimili. Okay? So another definition here is rights are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlements. So ang rights, they are considered as fundamental rules or normative rules that we have. Okay, anong ginagawa ng mga ito? Rights are actually allowing people on what a person could do, okay, or it gives what is owed to a certain person or to people. Okay, and ito ang lagi niyong tatandaan. Rights will always be based on some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. Okay, so we have we have the Philippine constitutional rights, we have the Bill of Rights, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay. Now, if you're going to combine the two words, human and rights, ano kaya magiging definition niya? So we have here, human rights are rights we have simply because we exist as human beings. Ang ganda, di ba? That's why I consider human rights as one of the beautiful two words, okay, that we have. So they are not granted by any state. Wherever you go, you will always have human rights, no matter who you are. Okay? So simply because we exist as humans, we have that. We are entitled for human rights. So these universal rights are inherent to us all. Ibig sabihin, andyan yan from the time na tayo pinanganak and from the time na tayo mamatay, it is within us. Okay? we have human rights from that time. Now, universal in nature, bakit universal? Kasi nga po, no matter your nationality, your sexuality, your national or your ethnic origin, your color, your religion, language, or any other status, human rights will apply to you. Okay? Next one. Um, ang human rights, it's actually based from the most fundamental kind of right, which is the right to life, yung karapatan nating mabuhay. Now, ang tao, of course, mahirap na breathing ka lang, no? Mahirap na namumuhay ka lang na you're just trying to live to survive. Mahirap yon. That's why human rights also encompasses those rights that make living worthy. Okay? Kagaya ng rights to food, education, right to work, health, and liberty. Yung mga yan, this makes life worth living. Para you are not just simply breathing, but rather you are living. Okay? So, human rights are the basic rights and freedoms that belong to every person without exception in the world. Okay? That is from birth until death. Always remember that. And they apply regardless of where you are from, what you believe, ano man yung belief mo sa buhay, and how you choose to live your life. It will apply to you. That is human rights. And of course, they can never be taken away. Hindi pwedeng basta-basta na lang tanggalin sa'yo yung human rights na yan. But there are some exceptions to this or restrictions to this. Okay? So for example, if a person break the law, okay, may nagawang mali, kasalanan sa batas ng isang tao, okay, ayan, magkakaroon tayo ng punishment on that. O kaya naman, for the interest of the national security. Ayan, nung ECQ natin, di ba, na ang ating freedom of movement na-restrict as for that time period. Bakit? Kasi for the national safety, dahil nga tumataas ang kaso ng COVID-19 sa bansa natin. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng almost national enhanced community quarantine. So these basic rights are based on shared values since we are all human and from the beginning we have dignity, dapat merong fairness, equality, respect, and independence. So naka-base ang human rights natin dyan sa 5 values na yan. So from dignity, fairness, okay, equality, respect, and of course, independence. So these values are defined and protected by law. Now, here are the different fundamental principles of human rights. Okay, ano ba yung mga basic principles ng meron ang human rights natin? So number 1, human rights are universal. Okay, there is universality to human rights. So everyone is born with and possesses the same rights. Pagkapanganak mo pa lang, ano man yung kulay ng balat mo, nationality mo, saan ka man nakatira, anumang status ang meron ka, you have human rights. And we are all equally entitled to our human rights. Walang mas nakatatas, walang nakabababa kung human rights ang pinag-uusapan. So, ano bang pinagkaiba ng human rights doon sa mga regular rights na meron tayo? So, the main distinction between most parts of rights and human rights is that while regular rights apply from subject to place and time, human rights apply at all times to every human being across the globe. So yun eh. So ibig sabihin, ang human rights, anumang oras, saan mang parte ng mundo, universal nga it applies to you. Okay? So itong human rights are universal. This is affirmed by the Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Ano bang sinasabi ng Article 1 ng Universal Declaration of Human Rights? It states that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So lahat tayo, we are born free with equal dignity. So the universality of human rights is a principle proclaimed to ensure and reinforce the weight to be placed on these rights. That's why all state must protect itong ating human rights. Okay, number 2 na principle ng ating human rights or basic principle. Human rights are inalienable. Okay, ano pa yung ibig sabihin ng inalienable, no? Ang inalienable, ang ibig sabihin ng all human rights are non-derogable and cannot be removed by any political order. Okay? Pag sinabi natin non-derogable po, ito yung it cannot be limited or suspended at any circumstance. Okay, hindi pwedeng isuspend yan at any circumstance. So this means that human rights belong to every person and cannot be taken from a person under any circumstances. But there will be exceptions. Sinasabi ko na eh. Human rights should not be taken away except in specific situations and according to due process. So meron tayo ng mga human rights na um, pwedeng tinatanggal sa'yo, pero dapat naka-base siya sa due process. Naka-base siya sa batas. Hindi pwedeng tatanggalin na lang sa'yo ng walang dahilan. Okay? It should be according to due process. So for example, yung right to liberty natin. The right to liberty may be restricted if a person is found guilty of a crime by a court of law. So kung ikaw ay na-convict and you are guilty on a certain crime, then your right to liberty is being restricted until the time na ikaw ay makalabas sa kulungan hanggang magampanan mo yung binigay sa yung punishment. Okay? So, yun, isa yun sa mga exceptions. Pero, in general, ang human rights po are inalienable. Hindi pwedeng basta-basta yan tanggalin sa'yo. Next one, human rights are indivisible. Okay? So pag sinabi natin indivisible, lahat ng human rights natin, they are all equally important. And hindi pwedeng i-separate mo yung isa. Binigyan mo nga ng right to life, pero tinanggal mo naman yung right to education niya. O, di ba? The person is living, but the living situation is not worthy kasi wala yung right to education or kung other yung mga iba pang rights like right to food, right to safety water or to clean water, right to work. Kung tinanggal mo yan, binigyan mo siya ng right to life pero wala yung iba. No, hindi pwede yon. Human rights are indivisible. All of the rights are equally important and this means that each human right has equal importance. Okay? Pare-pareho ang importansya ng human rights ng lahat na meron tayo. So, a person cannot be denied one right because nag-decide yung isang tao na mas importante yung right to life kaysa sa right to education. Hindi po ganun. Both rights should be protected and should be given of equal importance. Hindi ganun nag-work ang human rights na tinatawag natin. Now, kung ang human rights are indivisible, hindi pwedeng mas may angat na isa at may mas mababang isa. Ang human rights, these are also interdependent. When we say interdependent, they are connected and with each other and you cannot actually fully enjoy all of the human rights na may naiiwang isa. So for example, di ba? We have the rights na political, civil, social, cultural, and economic. Pag-uusapan natin to maya-maya lamang doon sa mga major categories of human rights. All of these rights, yung political, civil, social, cultural, and economic, they are all connected and none can be fully enjoyed without the others. So this means that all human rights complement each other. Okay? So for example, your ability to participate in your government, it is directly affected by your right to express yourself. So, hindi ka makakapag-participate actually doon sa mga activities or sa government kung wala kang karapatan para i-express yung sarili mo. You have no right to express your opinion. Kung tinanggal yun sa atin, we cannot say something. We cannot give our inputs as to how is the government is working, di ba? So that's why they work together. Also, to get an education, and even to obtain the necessities of life, such as the right to water, to food, to housing, and to health. So, ang mga rights na yan, they are indivisible and as well, they are interdependent. They are working together. Okay? Next one. We have here, human rights are equal and non-discriminatory. Hindi porke bakla yung isang tao, hindi porke ang tawag dito, lesbian yung isang tao is nawawalan siya ng human rights. 'Di ba? Kakapanalo lang ni Miss Luigi Gomez. Ayan. So medyo she is on a issue ngayon, pero 'di ba? Hindi pa din ganoon. She has the right na meron din tayo. Okay? So, pag-usapan natin itong human rights are equal and non-discriminatory. Pag sinabi natin ito, all individuals are equal as human beings. Presidente ka man, ako ay ordinaryong mamamayan, we are equal. We are the same human being. You cannot have more rights than me. We should be equal as to our rights. And by virtue of the inherent dignity of each human person. So parehas tayo na pinanganak na may dignidad. Okay? So no one therefore should suffer discrimination on the basis of race, okay, color, ethnicity, gender, age, language, sexual orientation, religion, political, or other opinion, national, social, or geographical origin. Disability, kasama din dyan. Property, hindi porke mas mayaman ka kaysa sa akin, mas madami kang human rights or mas importante ka compared sa akin. No, hindi ganon. Birth or other status as established by human rights standards. So last year, or if I'm not mistaken, last year ba, ngayong taon, di ba, meron tayo nung Black Movement, kasi meron at meron pa ring discrimination. And that should not be the way of our living in this earth, in this world, no? Human rights is for everyone. It should be equally given without discrimination, no matter what your color is and your sexual orientation is. And yung mga iba pa na nabanggit dyan. Also, human rights, human rights should be participatory and it should have inclusivity. Okay? Na nag-stutter po ako, pasensya na. So, all people have the right to participate in and access information relating to the decision-making processes that affect their lives and well-being. So, kaya nga pag sinabi natin human rights, dapat you are not, hindi ka namimili. Okay? Kumbaga, on this principle na, kung ano man yung mangyayari sa buhay ko, I should have the right to be actively participating in it. Okay? I should, kung for example, no? Okay. So for example, yung 'di ba pag namimili tayo ng mga senador, ng mga member of the government natin, ng Senado, ng presidente, ng Congress, okay? We are choosing them. When we are choosing them, we have to think na they are the people na may part sa paggawa ng batas ng bansa natin. Okay? So, andun tayo on that time na nabumoto tayo, we are actually actively participating. We have inclusivity as to who we are putting in to the government. Okay, so rights-based approaches require a high degree of participation by communities, civil society, minorities, women, young people, indigenous peoples, and other identified groups. So, human rights is participatory and there should be inclusivity to it. Hindi pwedeng mga lalaki lang nag-decide sa bansa natin. There should be inclusivity to it. Lastly, human rights is both rights and obligations. Pag sinabi natin both rights and obligations, it's a matter actually of a relationship between us to the people and to the government. Okay? So all states have ratified at least one of the 9 core human rights treaties. So ito pag-uusapan natin to pagdating natin sa Module 4 or dun sa Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So as well as one of the 9 optional protocols. So 80% of the states in the entire universe, in the entire world, have ratified 4 or more. So this means the states have obligations and duties under international law to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights. So ang ibig sabihin lang nito na tayo, we should be working together with the government in the respect of our human rights, protection of our human rights, and fulfilling of human rights. So ang state natin mismo, ang government natin, they have the obligation na maibigay yung ating human rights and maprotektahan and marespeto yung human rights natin. So we have here the obligation to respect means that states must refrain from interfering with or curtailing the enjoyment of human rights. So dapat ang mga gobyerno, ang mga states, they should not interfere in the enjoyment of our human rights. Pangalawa, the state has the government to protect individuals and groups against human rights abuses. So hindi lang dapat yung mga isang tao lang yung pinoprotektahan ng state natin, but rather also as well groups on this. So grupo ng kababaihan, grupo ng mga AITA, okay? So if dapat ang gobyerno natin, ang state, mapoprotektahan tayo from any kind of human rights abuses, whether by individual abuse or by group abuse. We also have here, the state has the obligation to fulfill okay, and must take positive action to facilitate the enjoyment of basic human rights. So ang government, it should have a proactive action in the pursuit of giving the basic human rights to every Filipino, to every human being actually, kasi buong universe na yung buong world na yung pinag-uusapan natin eh. So all states must give or must fulfill yung actions para ma-enjoy natin yung basic human rights. Okay? Now, I want you to be, kumbaga, dapat maalala nyo to, itong last na part na ito nung ating principles na, meanwhile, as individuals, while we are entitled to our human rights, oo, entitled tayo sa human rights, we should also work on protecting the rights of others. So there will be some situations na the human rights of others will be abused or will be disrespected. And sana hindi tayo magbulag-bulagan on that. We should stand up for the human rights of others. So there are two major categories of human rights. Ayan. So nasa second na tayo and last part of the module. There are two major categories of human rights. We have the civil political rights, ayan, and we also have the economic and social and cultural rights. So while economic and social and cultural rights are framed as rights a person is entitled to, okay, most civil and political rights are about protection from certain things like torture and slavery. So, ano bang difference ng civil and political rights? Okay? So, pag sinabi nating civil and political rights, anong pinagkaiba ng civil and political rights doon sa economic, social, and cultural rights? Bakit nakakategorize sila, di ba? Okay, so we have here the civil and political rights. Pag sinabi natin civil and political rights, this refer to a person's rights to take part in the civil and political life of their community without discrimination or oppression. Okay, so meron tayong karapatan na mag-take part tayo into the civil and political life ng ating bansa. Okay, since tayo mga Pilipino, community natin ito, nang hindi tayo na-discriminate or na-oppress. So this includes rights and freedom as to right to vote, right to privacy, meron tayong freedom of speech, and freedom from torture. Now, ano naman yung isang category? Yun yung economic, social, and cultural rights. So, pag sinabi natin economic, social, and cultural rights, this relate to a person's rights to prosper and grow and to take part in social and cultural type activities. So, itong group of rights naman na ito, this includes rights to health, right to education, and right to work. So, anong difference ng dalawa, ng civil and political rights doon sa economic, social, and cultural rights? So, the main difference between these two groups of rights is that doon sa civil and political rights, ang government, ang role niya is to make sure that any person or any other group is not denied of their civil and political rights. Kagaya ng dapat hindi ma-deny sa atin yung karapatan nating makaboto. Maganda nga na na-extend yung voting natin dito sa bansa until October 30, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, yun yung isa, yun yung civil and political rights, yun yung pinagkaiba. Ang economic and social and cultural rights naman, governments must take active steps to ensure rights are being fulfilled. Kasi kung tatandaan natin yung kanina, ang civil and political rights, ito yung mga right to vote, right to privacy. So yung mga yan, dapat hindi dinideny sa atin yan ng gobyerno. Okay, o kaya naman if somebody is abusing that, dapat the government should take action on it. Pero yung mga economic, social, and cultural rights like right to education, right to health, right to food, right to education, bakit ko na? The government must take active steps on that. Ito nga, itong nangyari na K-12, it is an active step of the government in ensuring that the educational system of the Philippines is improving. Okay? Ito rin, yung free tuition, ayan, it is an active step of the government in ensuring na ma-fulfill yung right to education na meron tayo. Okay? So, ito naman yung mga iba't ibang klase ng rights na nakapaloob doon sa civil and political rights. So, meron tayong right to life. Okay? Pag sinabi nating right to life, Ayaw, gusto ako maingay kasi siya pag hindi hawakan. So, pag sinabi natin right to life, karapatang mabuhay. Okay? And alam natin yan eh. Very basic. Kasama yan sa civil and political rights na meron tayo. We should have freedom from torture and cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment or punishment. Dapat hindi uh, free tayo from any kind of torture and cruel. I know there are still some activities and some actions na meron pa ring inhumane and degrading treatment na hindi naman talaga dapat eh. Kasi alam niyo naman yan eh, doon sa mga kapulisan, on inside the penitentiary or prison, meron tayong mga naririnig na mga kwento as to inhumane treatment of the prisoners o kaya naman inhumane treatment of the suspect, 'di ba? We also have here in the area of civil and political rights the freedom from slavery, servitude, and forced labor. So, dati uso to eh, itong slavery eh. Black slavery, okay, doon sa French, sa mga French, and uso to sa kanila. Ngayon, halos wala na itong slavery and servitude na to. So, we also have here right to liberty and security of person. And of course, yung nabanggit ko kanina na halos kapareho nung konektado doon sa freedom from torture is to the right of detained persons to be treated with humanity. So, if inform ko lang kayo, yung mga prisoners natin, may iba't ibang programs yan inside the prison system. Okay? Though may mga bad things tayong narinig, there are also some good things. So, for example, they have their basketball areas there in the prison area. And also, meron din silang church doon. Ayan. So, they are still treated with humanity. Meron tayong freedom of movement and right to fair trial and prohibition of retroactive criminal laws. So, doon tayo sa freedom of movement. Okay, may karapatan tayo na pumunta sa mga lugar na walang restrictions, ay mga walang restrictions. May karapatan tayong pumunta doon and kasama yun sa right of freedom of movement natin. Ang freedom of movement natin, naapektuhan yan nung yung ECQ yung Enhanced Community Quarantine, na-restrict itong freedom of movement natin, itong karapatan natin, itong civil and political right na to. Kasi nga, because of the purpose of national safety. Kasi nga pataas yung COVID-19 upsurge yung cases noon. So, ngayon, sa may Manila, may upsurge of cases sila. So, medyo restricted yung freedom of movement na meron sa kanila. We also have the right to fair trial. If you are a suspect, or if you are an accused, you have this right. And we have the prohibition of retroactive criminal laws. So ang ibig sabihin ng retroactive criminal laws, bawal hindi talaga kasi actually pwede yan. Pinoprohibit talaga yan na ang isang batas is na i-apply ngayon or na-approve ngayon. And then, sinasabi niya na ang action na ito ay criminal. Yung mga nakagawa nun before, hindi dapat yun mag-a-apply sa kanila. Okay? So, ang criminal law, it should be proactive. Okay? It should be proactive. Prospective. There is a prospectivity in its character. Yun nga lang, magiging retroactive lang yan kapag ang magbe-benefit is yung akusado, is yung mga akusado o kaya naman yung mga serving their punishment. Okay, for example, bumaba yung penitensya or yung punishment or yung penalty doon sa isang krimen, pwede yung mag-apply sa kanila. Next one, we have here the right to recognition as person before the law. Okay, so every person is equal before the law and is entitled to equal protection of the law without discrimination. Okay? We also have the right to privacy. Okay, so importante ito ngayon lalo na sa digital age natin. Okay? Madali na kasing makuha eh. Ang labanan na ngayon is about data and information, di ba? So importante itong right to privacy na maibigay and ma-fulfill sa atin itong right to privacy. We also have the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Freedom of opinion and expression. Ayan. Prohibition of propaganda for war and of incitement to national, racial, or religious hatred. Any propaganda for war and any advocacy of national, racial, or religious hatred that constitutes, okay, Incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence shall be prohibited by law. Dapat pinaprohibit yan. And we have here the freedom of assembly and freedom of association. Karapatan tayo for assembly and association. Ngayon, may restrictions lang dito dahil nga sa pandemic na meron tayo. We also have the right to marry and found a family and the right to take part in the conduct of public affairs. Right to vote. We also have the right to be elected and have access to public office, di ba? Ngayon, filing of COC, Certificate of Candidacy, maraming mga nag-a-apply o nagpa-file ng kanilang Certificate of Candidacy sa COMELEC, di ba? So, right to equality before the law and non-discrimination. Yan yung mga kasama sa civil and political rights na meron tayo. Okay. Now, in the area of economic, social, and cultural rights, ito yung mga rights na kailangang maibigay, okay, proactively ng ating gobyerno. Yung civil and political rights, yun yung mga rights na dapat protektahan ni state or ng government. Ito naman, proactively maibigay. We have here the right to work. Ayan. Right to just and favorable conditions of work. Meron din tayong karapatan para mag-form and mag-join ng trade unions. We also have the right to social security. We have the protection of the family, right to an adequate standard of living including adequate food, clothing and housing, right to health, and right to education. So, yun yung mga area of economic, social, and cultural rights. Kung mapansin ninyo, itong mga rights na to, it makes life worth living, di ba? Meron tayong protection of the family, right to health, and right to education. Now, if you have any questions as to this, you could ping me, you could message me in our Microsoft Teams, and I would just like to thank you for listening to this 30-minute discussion. Ayan, naka 30 minutes tayo. Don't worry, this discussion is for the entire week na, and for the next episode, we will be talking about freedom versus human rights. So that is all, and thank you for your time, and please stay put for the activities to be posted on our Microsoft Teams account.